Gentlemen, tonight is the March 4th Horsehead Central School District Board of Education budget meeting for the 21-22 school year. At this time, we are coming to you via remote from the high school, as we have set up for the past couple of meetings with our community comment section in the main entry lobby for the high school auditorium. Tonight's meeting is about the budget presentation. There will be a slight agenda in regards to human resources and appointments. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our board president, Ms. Christine Dale.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to
To
the
the
republic
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Okay, so as we've been doing for the past few public board meetings, we've been opening up to public comment, and we do have a computer set up in the lobby for anybody who wishes to come and ask a question or make a comment. So Nancy, do we have anybody here?
No, Christine, there is no community members present.
Okay, thank you. So I invite anybody who would like to come to a future board meeting, please do so. If you have any questions or any comments in the meantime, you can send an email right on our website. If you go to Board of Education, it'll give you the email that you can send your questions or concerns to. They will filter through Dr. Douglas, and then Dr. Douglas sends them out to the board, so we stay on top of the concerns and questions that we have. So I'm going to move on to item 3, which is our budget development. So it's continuation of taking a look at our 2021-2022 budget. So Katie, I'll turn it over to you.
And if I can mention, Mr. Giancoli, can you make sure that the share feature is on for the screen as well, so that the public knows this presentation is also on our board docs public website, so that you can follow along at home as well.
You're good.
Could someone tell me, is that showing the presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone again this week. Tonight, we'll continue our budget overview and hear from the special ed and athletics departments on their respective budgets. Unfortunately, still at this time, we're still in a holding pattern, waiting to see what happens at the federal level. The federal stimulus package did make it through the House. It's currently with the Senate, working through their amendments and proposal to the bill. So at this time, it's not necessarily clear on what is being allocated to states directly and to schools directly. So as it stands right now, our projected state aid is still what it's been since we first started talking together in February. Again, just want to point out the governor's proposal this year does include that local district funding adjustment, that he's planning to reduce our STAR payment that we receive from the state through the tax program, not state aid, but through the tax program, and replace that money with the potential federal aid that may be coming. Again, it's just putting districts down a very difficult road if this is the picture that comes to fruition, bringing back that old gap elimination adjustment that we all remember that we weren't quite made whole from. So how the governor will plug that hole in state aid once the federal money goes away is definitely a big concern. Our tax levy limit, I won't go through the whole calculation tonight, but again, just the items to point out, the tax-based growth factor is down from last year. as is the allowable levy growth factor. Those are two main components that allow us to increase our levy limit. With them both down, we've lost some of the power to increase the levy based on this calculation. We are currently showing a capital exclusion of just over $1 million. That is the portion of the calculation that takes all of our debt for capital projects, as well as our bus debt for bus purchases, offsets them by building aid and transportation aid on those capital type expenditures. So right now that's showing as a positive, but we are continuing to work on the potential for the half year of the middle school aid and the early aid start for the high school project. So once we sort out those pieces, that capital exemption will be reduced down if we do include them. But as it stands right now, with the building aid that we do know we're getting in that particular piece of the equation, our tax cap calculation is currently at 2.09% for a projected increase or $852,000. Our total revenue picture at this time, again, in the tax items, that includes our levy, which in this figure is kept flat until the board has further discussions on where we're going with the levy. It includes our STAR payment, which has been reduced by the governor's proposal, and our pilot payments. State aid includes all the other state aid items we've talked about before. Federal aid is the governor's offset to the STAR reduction. And the other revenue is our interest, admissions, rental income donation, and our stop loss insurance payments. Again, not including any appropriated reserves or fund balance at this point. That's one of the tools we'll talk about later on in the budget process as we continue to fine tune that gap and see where things stand. So without those pieces, revenue currently stands at $78 million. Summary of budgeted expenditures. Again, no changes here at this point. Still working behind the scenes on many of these pieces. Adjustments will be coming at the next presentation. We'll go through our instructional budget and our benefits budget, our two largest components, and then we'll start talking about the adjustments that we're looking to make. But at this point, the total budget stands at $84.8 million, which is a 3.29% increase. With those two pieces, our current gap is at $6.8 million. But again, as we work through this budget process, we have these various tools at our disposal, namely waiting on what our state aid looks like and what the federal aid support will be. A recap of our departments to date. We've heard from Transportation, Technology, Facilities, and Human Resources. Transportation, again, the increase was due to the settlement of their contract to attract and retain bus drivers and have a rate competitive with the market. Technology, we are continuing to support money in the BOCES budget for any technology needs that we may have when we come back to school in September. Facilities recognized an increase due to the addition of 10 cleaners to support our cleaning initiatives during COVID-19 this current year and going forward. And Human Resources was a pretty status quo position. With that, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Okay, good evening. Thank you everybody for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to share our budget in our department and the information, just a little bit about what's been going on in our department over the course of the last school year. So we have been shifting our focus in our department over the past year, really past couple years, to really build a collaborative approach to education and leadership, really working closely with Tiffany and Tony and the curriculum team to look to build a bridge between general education and special education curriculum and programming, especially what's coming up in the work that we've started, which is looking at how we can address any identified gaps that we have as a result of the pandemic and what reopening schools could look like either in the near future or fall, whenever that's determined. So we have spent a significant amount of time talking about what that curriculum work could look like in curriculum development so that there is a nice tie between special education and general education for our students. With regards to the Student Services Special Education Department budget overview, what you'll see in front of you first is the salaries, and that is broken down on the next slide. So I'll leave those pieces for the following slide. Equipment, we kept flat for this year. What's in that equipment line are really a bulk of two things. Equipment that we purchase for students that are in need of specialized equipment, such as like an FM auditory trainer for a student that has a hearing aid, or equipment that we have in our nurse's office as well. Next line are our contractual or conference costs. A contractual cost for us would be primarily for students that are in another school district, like a non-public. So they're in Notre Dame, they might be in Holy Family, and we pay a proportionate share of the nursing services, the health services to those other districts for our students that are attending private schools in those districts. Conferences, although the pandemic, has changed the way that we do our professional learning and attend conferences, thankfully it hasn't stopped the learning in all the conferences. So encompassed in that conference are a large number of people that are partaking in professional development that may be happening outside of the district. So it would be nurses, OTs, PTs, speech therapists, school psychologists, social workers, and anyone in our office, any of our staff. Supplies, those again are purchase supplies that we have either for our office or to support what's happening with our related service providers, any testing materials they need, nursing supplies, general classroom supplies, and our office supplies. And we left that, as well as the contractual and the conference, flat for the upcoming school year. Tuition, again, that is the tuition that we pay to other districts. We have contracts with other districts when our students are in need of services for being placed in a foster care situation that may be outside of our district, or again, if they attend a non-public school that's in another district and they have an IEP, we pay that district to provide the IEP services for students that are in that district of location. Again, that may fluctuate. We budgeted flat, but sometimes that does change depending on how many kids are placed in foster care or decide that they would like to attend a non-public school. The BOCES budget, you see an increase from $4,387,000 up to $4 million and almost $600,000. That primarily is due to a rate increase in services for our budget, our BOCES services that we take advantage of. There is also an increase in the need for support for OT and PT. So we've asked for an increase in BOCES services for those two services. We currently have 2.5 days of a PT and 2.5 days of an OT through BOCES servicing our district, in addition to our own staff. And we are looking at increasing that to 4 days a week. So the overall total budget increase projection for our office is 3.79%. The student services, again, student services, special education salary and position information. The increase you see are all contractual in nature, which is what's reflected here in the salaries projected for the 21-22 school year. The FTEs are all the same as they are for this current school year, with the exception of the teaching assistants. Again, that fluctuates with the needs of the students. And if we have, more students or less students that may need a one-on-one teaching assistant, that will change the number of positions that we have. Other than the teaching assistants, all the positions totals remain the same. A few other highlights, with regards to our staffs and positions in our department, the social worker and social worker assistants, you'll see 13 positions. One change within that 13 is last year we had the social work assistant at the intermediate school retire. So in continuing on with what we started at the elementaries and having a master's level social worker at each of the elementaries, we transitioned that position from a social work assistant to a master's level social worker. Couldn't have come at a better time, given what we're dealing with the pandemic and the increased needs we're seeing with the social emotional learning. So we really are appreciative of the support that you have given us in being able to continue growing that level of support for the students in our district. We will also use our master's level social workers as we approach the social emotional learning curriculum work that will happen most likely over the summer and into the next school year. This group will really be an integral part of that work. The other note of highlight on this slide is our school nurses. You'll notice that that is flat budgeted from this year into next year. That's because we're embarking on entering into negotiations for their contract. So they're entering negotiations soon. So once we have a negotiated amount, that amount will be updated for the budget for the next school year. That's all I have for our budget. Any questions that you guys have?
Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
Bert, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Katie. Welcome, everybody, or good evening. Just give you a overview of our athletic department. And first would like, we've been on a pause since the beginning of the school year. And then since January, we've gone full speed, 100 miles an hour till now. So I do like to think that since January, we've invited our kids back into our gyms with open gyms. And in our winter season, put together a working schedule and been able to give our student athletes some contests and some good experiences right up to this point, and we started our fall season this week. So pretty happy with how our coaches and student athletes have handled the guidelines that we have to attend to. But again, it's been a working process, and happy how we've been dealing with it and moving along. But going into our athletic overview, the salaries, again, that'll be on our second slide too, where that is broken down by position. Contractual, the big part of our contractual line is a big part of our reconditioning for football and for our lacrosse needs. And that also makes up our state dues, our local dues, with also our invitationals for all our sports that have to sign up for invitationals during their season. In addition, that also includes any state competitions that we attend to throughout the year. Our contractual line takes care of. Officials is flat. Again, here, this is all our home events that consist of all our modified JV and varsity events for all the officials that come to Horseheads. Our supply line is we supply all the needs for all our teams that need to compete and play on a daily basis. And that we have 60 teams. So through that, with including our athletic training supplies and what our team needs or what our office needs, that's what our supplies consist of as far as coming out of our supply line. Equipment line is also our replacement cycle for our uniforms. Also, any big ticket items that we may need comes out of our equipment. We've also sometimes, well, the last 2 years, we've had to meet safety mandates. What that consists of is this past year in 2021, we've had to meet the chest protectors for lacrosse had to have a NOXI stamp on it. So we had to make sure that all our goalie chest protectors are NOXI stamped and supplied for our athletes. And then as we move into the 22 season, spring of 22, we also have to include now shoulder pads for all lacrosse players that have to have NOXI stamped lacrosse pads. So that does come a little price, and we are preparing to move forward with that. And in the past years, we've also had to do NOXI baseballs, NOXI softballs, along with their batting helmets as well. So we do have safety mandates that we do once in a while have to meet. BOCES is also our sectional dues, and also anything that we have coasters with, such as our family ID and scheduled galaxying that we work through state aid with BOCES. Our department is pretty much a flat rate outside the salaries with an increase of 3.84%. As the salary positions are broken down, the athletic office is secretarial and myself, and we have 73 coaches. So on contractual obligation, this is the slight increase. Our pool supervisor and lifeguards, that's for every practice, swim meet, anything that takes place in our pool, we have to have lifeguards and a pool supervisor to maintain and make sure that we are in compliance with everything in our pool. So again, that stays flat. Time scorers is also our supervisors or any timekeepers that take place at any of our home events. That is also flat. And then our stipend positions, which include our athletic manager, our camp, varsity camp director, varsity camp coordinator, and obviously the addition that we've added on the last few years with unified sports. So that is our breakdown of our salary position. At this time, I'll take any questions in regards to athletics.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
It's Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, just a quick, you may have said this and I might have missed it, but just, is the FTE this consistent from last year, or is there any increase in the numbers there?
For
Just overall, like Kelly had said, it was flat except for the teacher assistants. I'm just curious, like, are we adding any personnel in those numbers, or is it
Nope.
basically the same as it was last year?
Nope, it stayed the same.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bert.
Yep.
So, I just wanted to wrap things up tonight, just revisit, where we stand with our $6.8 million gap at this point. It's a frustrating year. I mean, typically we have the governor's proposal. We kind of have a good handle on where he's going with things. Maybe expecting a little bit more aid once he finalizes the budget. And this year is nothing like that. We're, basically at this point waiting for the federal government to do their dance, sort out, all their differences to complete that stimulus package before we really can understand what's coming down to the state and how the governor will incorporate that into his overall budget. So hopefully, in the next few weeks, that'll get sorted out and we'll start seeing some direction. But again, we have the tools at our disposal. We have the tax levy decision. Right now at the 2.09, we'll continue to talk through that and talk about what direction the board would like to go as far as the levy this year. State and federal aid tied together, again, waiting for the federal government. Budget reductions, yes, are coming. I'm working through things, making adjustments, and we'll start talking through those next week. And then we always have our use of fund balance and reserves at our disposal, that we've made good progress on how we utilize them and how we rely on them. And we'll continue to make smart decisions on how we incorporate them into our budget. So any questions as things stand now with the budget, or Dr. Douglas, anything you'd like to add?
I'll wait for any question. I'll add a final thought with the last slide.
Katie, just to make sure I have this right. So you mentioned the 2.09 is the current tax cap calculation. And so to be clear, if we went above that, we went to 2.10, that's when we kick into the needing, is it 60?
60% plus one.
Plus, okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I had that right in my head. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can add there, Mr. Christmas, right now, we always do, as we get closer to the end of the development process, we do the estimated tax rate impact so that people know. Just on a glance, even at that number with the growth that we had, even though it says it's 2.09 and people will say, well, my taxes are going up 2.09, the actual rate will be most likely lower than that. That's been our experience, that this potentially estimates out at almost a 0% tax increase or a tax decrease, which we experienced last year. And then, of course, this cap can adjust depending on all the other items as we find out more. It's important to note that the Senate did open up budget debate on the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. It looks like that right now is tending to go forward, which will change our numbers in the near future. And I believe it should probably start to play out around March 14th or a little bit sooner. So we really have to take a wait and see, and April 15th will be our biggest move on the budget at this point. Other questions? Well, thank you, Katie. We have a couple more budget meetings. We have our next regular Board of Education meeting, but that is everything right now until we get to April 21st is a budget meeting and budget presentation or adoption of the budget. So we need people to be aware this is an ever fluid process at this point, and it's never been more fluid at this point because of everything that's going on with COVID, the politics in the state and the politics at the federal level. I know that the board mentioned some other things that are going on in the area. This budget is meant to look at our school system from a fully opened program for next year. Unless we get guidance to the otherwise, that's what we're expecting. We are awaiting guidance at any minute, just like Assemblyman Friend said last week. Expect something within 7 days. Our 7 days is tomorrow. I think it's probably going to take a little bit longer than that, but if not, we have to consider some potential moves even in-house to try to enhance some of our education as we go forward for the last quarter. And I know that may not come as a surprise to many because we've been talking about some of this need in the district. And I know that has been where some of the concern is with our parents. Ultimately, we're all trying to make sure we follow the guidance that's out there, and the district will follow that guidance. And when it changes, the district will adjust with that guidance, but we hope it comes sooner rather than later. So that's where we are right now in the budget development and answering. There's a lot of news stories out there. Please understand that news stories are specific to their own school district. They may have schools shuttered. I already shared one word in regards to an issue in Vestal, as well as there is a new story out of Onondaga. We will talk to the county executive and find out whether there's any ability to allow what's happening in Onondaga or trying to happen in Onondaga if it's legally able to be done. So just so that the community knows, for our budget purposes as well as our school purposes, we are reviewing and looking into everything as much as we can to do the best for Horseheads. So at that point, I want to turn it back over to the board and say thank you. If you have any questions, I know we do have a little HR event agenda afterwards as well.
Okay, thank you, Tom and Katie and Kelly and Bert. So next up, we have our personnel items for action. So we have a few HR recommendations. So can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any comments or discussion on what's listed for HR recommendations? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And any abstentions? Okay. I know we don't officially have it in the agenda board comments, but I will open it up to any board comments if anybody has any questions or anything that you want to bring up. Tom?
Sorry. We are heading into the fall 2 season, and I really cannot wait until March 18th to have this discussion, because 2 days later is probably a football event, either on site or off site. Not that football is the only sport, but because we do have a rule on spectators indoors, and I'm not saying that the indoor changes. It is 2 persons for home events. That's what we've been operating, and then special nights for senior nights. But when we go outside to outside venues, we still have to stay to the county's order of no more than 2 per person or 2 per athlete. But we have got it just for home. Would the board like to allow, as long as we can, and it's the athletics determination, for visitors for outside events, as long as we have the appropriateness of seating and social distancing. And the only thing I would ask is that those districts bringing visitors, that they also, like we will, send someone to check them in, follow them, and do their contract tracing. Just like if we go to Elmira and they let us in at their outside, I will make sure Bert, and if we have to, we will compensate those people to act as the district representative. I just wanted to know if the board would support me on that for home and away events for outdoor activities as we head into the fall and the future spring.
Any questions or comments on that, Dan?
So just to be clear, the question is, are we okay with allowing 2 spectators per athlete for visiting teams at our outdoor events? And
Yes.
okay. I'll just start. I would be in favor of it, frankly, because I mean, I would hope that if my child was going to play somewhere else, and I'd like to see a reciprocal kind of thing where we have the opportunity to see them other places. I guess the question I would have is, in so doing, would we be able to potentially have more Horsehead spectators if we didn't allow visitors spectators, or, is that number capped regardless of what we do with the other number? Do you know?
Yeah. Officially at this point, the county executive has allowed sports to proceed with 2 spectators per athlete maximum. They have allowed some flexibility on senior nights. I think on senior nights when we're outside, we might be able to, where we're inside, we only have the senior parents and families come so that the whole family can experience it. But on the outside, if we have the room, I think we can still allow the 2 and a special senior section. If anything on those, if it gets too big, we would have to limit the visitors. And currently every district is doing their own thing. But inside, we just don't have all the capacity, and that's why we've stayed to just home spectators at this point. So I'm just asking, would you be allowing us to modify for outside venues? I'm okay with it, and we've asked them to help us with contract tracing and check-ins.
Hey, Tom, I'm certainly in support of it. There's no doubt about that. I guess the question that I would have is the same as Dan's. I mean, not that this would change my mind at all, but are other school districts willing to do the same?
Oh, I think different ones, like if we go to Steuben, they don't allow any spectators. I'm hoping that they're going to change it for outside, but that's their county rule. Our county rule is no more than 2 inside or out. We only have a deficiency on the indoor venues. Excuse me.
Brian?
I would be fine with the 2 visitors, parents. That's fine with me.
Warren?
Warren, you're on mute.
I know the space bar wouldn't let me unmute. I don't know how to find option B to get there. I don't know. I guess I am. I'm kind of neutral on it. I've been very cautious on this. So, Mr. Conklin, do you know what other districts might be planning on doing as the outdoor sports season progresses?
Give you an honest answer. I don't think we could guarantee on reciprocal. I think it's different at each school district. I've been finding that out. So there's no guarantees. But there possibly, because we are going outside, you will see districts change. But then again, as I say, I can't guarantee that we'll get reciprocal at every school that we go to.
And how big a burden would this become on us to check visiting parents?
The burden I would be placing on the other district to send a supervisor to do their screening, check-in, and contract tracing, and also to help keep distance. And we will reciprocate. If we have visitors, we will send somebody as well.
Okay, so if I understand what you just said, if the visiting district is unwilling to honor that request, will we not allow visitor parents then?
I would probably move no visitors, because we have enough to check in on outside for ourselves. Like, take a football game. We could have anywhere from 100 to 120 spectators. We've got to check each one of them in, screen them, and then be able to contact. That takes time. If we all of a sudden have to do that for a visiting team, say 50 people, that's even more time. Plus, it breaches. If I can take care of my people, they can take care of theirs. It keeps everybody as safe as possible, except the competitors on the football field, because they have to interact.
Okay. Thank you.
I think, so I'm in favor of it. However, I know just from being at the 2 home wrestling matches I was able to go to, Bert and the other people we had there from the district doing the check-ins and stuff spent a lot of time walking through the stands and reminding people to pull their masks up and really kind of visually making sure people were sitting on the X's and stuff like that. You know, and so my concern would be, you know, who then is responsible for doing that for the visitors? You know, making sure that people are following the rules, they are staying in their groups of 2. You know, because I just, you know, we're worried about our sidelines, and you ask the other team to bring people to check in, but are they also making sure that people are following the rules?
They would have to enforce our county's rules, and ultimately we're in charge of it. But at least we could go to somebody and say, hey, you've got to tell them this is what it is. I will tell you, we've had a couple problems, like because we get televised so much, we had some parents call in and say, the kids' masks were down here in basketball. That's going to happen. But I know Bert went around and started enforcing it even harder, just because of the fact we do not want to get one strike against us, because if we get 3, our sports are shut down, and we're not going to take that chance. So the inconvenience for others, they will have to deal with the fact that we have to make the decision for school property. And Bert has done that, as well as Miss Granger, as well as other people, as professionally and personally. And no one's really pushed back hard, but sometimes it takes getting adults used to it, because the kids seem to be pretty used to it at this point.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
Doug?
Wouldn't the new 200-person rule apply now for outdoor activity?
We're trying to find that out, because it's kind of new guidance that has been stated. I don't know if Chris is going to update that. We are pushing for it, especially for graduations, obviously, because we need some type of change by the end of the year. But at this point, even if the governor has said that, the county has put in a 2-person rule. So we can always bring that up with him as well.
And is the idea that, so traditionally the home fans sit on the side with the press box, and the visiting fans are on the other side, which are much smaller stands over there. Would we still follow that same kind of idea?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even, I mean, our new stadium, we wouldn't have a problem with it. But on our current stadium, the other side just has longer bleachers. They're just shallower in height. So I think we wouldn't have that much of a problem with it by the base on the amount of seating, because we know who our games are with. I think we're home against Elmira. We're home against Corning. With football, which is our biggest draw, but the Corning game is on the 20th and is most likely going to have to be played at another site with turf.
Is there enough space for a typical traveling football team to have 2 parents in our visitor stands?
It depends on the size. I think, say you have a team, I don't think we have anybody that has 50 kids on the sideline. So that would be 100. I would have to ask Mike, but I think you could cover 50 groups of 2 on our visitor side out there, using the whole width of the stands out there as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm just worried that there may not be enough room for 2 per, but I'd certainly support that if it's possible, or at the very least a one person per player.
Yeah, we do have that flexibility to go down based on the seats. That's already written in. I just wanted to update our question and answers so that people know about outdoor sites. Okay, it sounds like everybody's good with us making the adjustments there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, anything else anybody has? Doug?
So I wanted to talk about three things tonight. The first of which is the district is commonly using this rationale of, we're a large school district and the numbers don't work for us. Other districts can do this because they're smaller or smaller number of students. But that is not generally consistent with the class size data that is readily available to the public on the data.nysed.gov site. I pulled the average class sizes for all 21 school districts in the BOCES and compared them to ours. And our elementary grades, we tend to be about a person, sometimes two persons above the average. If you exclude out the what I call the three micro districts in our area, which is Bradford, Canasarega, and Jasper-Troopsburg. But everyone else has very similar class sizes to us. Where there is where I would agree somewhat is with the intermediate school tends to be 3 to 5 students above average compared to our region. And this is 2018, 2019 numbers, which are the most recent ones available on the site. Our middle school, though, tends to be 1 to 3 people, in one case, 4 people below average. So I think our middle school, with the virtual learning, folks that are, holding tight with that, I think you could probably, with that kind of space, you might be able to get students in for 3, 4, 5 days a week. Unfortunately, our high school data was incomplete for the 2018-19 year, only providing English language arts and US history average class sizes, but those were also below average, 1 or 2 students on average below in those 2 classes respectively. So, I think we need to get away from this language of, bigger districts can't do this. No, because the ratios are the same, essentially, that class sizes in our area are about, 15 to 17, somewhere in there, which is pretty much where we are as a district. So I would, I guess, challenge the district to, get creative in terms of, let's get students back at least 3 days a week on a rotating schedule, 3 on, 2 on, rotating back and forth between cohort A and B. There seems to be enough space at the middle school to make it happen. And I think the high school is probably the same way, and to get our students back in session more often. The second thing I want to talk about is just, I think I mentioned it briefly last time in talking with Dr. Douglas, that there is no written legal opinion on the issues that I brought up at the last board meeting. And I would just urge the district to obtain a written legal opinion on those matters. Lastly, I want to talk to the board about our obligations and duties as a board. If you look at education law, section 1709, it prescribes the powers and duties of boards of education. It says that the Board of Education shall have power and it shall be its duty to do the following. Subdivision 2 talks about to establish rules and regulations concerning the order and discipline of schools. And subdivision 6 says to operate school facilities. Subdivision 9 says to take charge and possession of the schoolhouses. Subdivision 28, with regard to COVID and cleaning, talks about furnishing janitorial care. And then the kind of catch-all is subdivision 33, which says to have in all respects the superintendent's management and control of the educational affairs of the district, and therefore shall have all the powers reasonably necessary to exercise powers granted expressly or by implication and to discharge duties imposed expressly or by implication by this chapter or other statutes. So that's a broad grant of power and duty to manage the superintendent's, the superintendent's management and control of the district. Conversely, the superintendent's powers are listed in 1711 of education law, and subdivision 2 talks about the powers and duties of a superintendent. So take 2B, for example, to enforce all provisions of law and all rules and regulations relating to the management of the schools and other educational, social, and recreational activities under the direction of the Board of Education. 2E, to have supervision and direction of associate, assistant, and other superintendents, and it lists all these other titles in the school district and other persons employed in the management of the schools or the other educational activities of the district authorized by this chapter and under the direction and management of the Board of Education. 2F, to have the supervision and direction over the enforcement and observance of the courses of study, the examination and promotion of pupils, and all of other matters pertaining to playgrounds, medical inspection, which I think is important in this COVID pandemic, recreation and social center work, libraries, lectures, and all other educational activities under the management, direction, and control of the Board of Education. And subdivision 3 says such superintendent shall be under the direction of the Board of Education, which shall prescribe his or her powers and duties except as provided in another section. So I guess my point is we've been working under a reopening plan that was developed by a stakeholder group that was working on guidance that was developed in July, over 7 months ago. We know a lot more about COVID now than we did then. That plan was presented to us as a board. We were not asked to vote on it. We were just asked basically, questions. Are you guys okay with this? Generally speaking, no vote. And then it went into action there. I would urge the board to let's take a vote on the reopening plan. Let's do we have the support currently, majority of this board, for that plan, which does not provide for anything more than in-person instruction 2 days a week. I think there are, my understanding, hundreds of parents that are clamoring for at least 3 days a week. Some would be ecstatic with 3, 4, and 5. And I know I'm annoying some adults by making these requests, but I have heard from too many parents about parents that can't afford or are making difficult choices economically because of our closure. But most importantly, the mental health of our students is at severe risk right now from everything I'm hearing anecdotally. And I think we need to do everything in our power to get the schools opened up more than they are. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I'm going to open it up first. If anybody has any comments or questions in response to what Doug just presented. Brian.
I get very concerned, and I know this plan was, set up in July, but I get very concerned when the Department of Health has not changed their parameters since that time period. And I don't think we as a board can move forward and just kind of override their beliefs at this point. I'm willing to follow the guidance of the science. If the Department of Health says 3 feet is permissible, I am good with going with 3 feet. I think the emotional needs of the students, we absolutely do need to move them back into school as quickly as possible, but we need to do it under the guidelines of the Department of Health. And I am not going to change until they give some guidance, or the county is allowed to give us guidance where we can go to 3 feet as opposed to 6 feet. And I just cannot, I'm not going to change my mind otherwise until we hear something from the Department of Health.
Any other reactions? comments? Tom?
So I struggle with this one, just like everybody else does. I mean, I'll restate what I said last time. There's nobody who wants kids in school full-time more than I do. There's nobody that believes kids should be in school full-time right now more than I do. But the piece that I'm having a hard time with is similar to that of Brian. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified to be either of them. But if the Department of Health is stating that things need to be a certain way for the safety of people, I'm not qualified to tell them they're wrong. I will be the first one in line, like Brian said, if this thing does go to 3 feet, I will be the first one in line recommending the kids go back full time the next day. But beyond that, and this is the part that I struggle with. Kids need to be back in school. That's just the bottom line. But I don't know if we have the flexibility to go against the Department of Health. I just can't go that far. Just my 2 cents.
Mary Ann?
I'm just basically going to agree with what has been said previous from Brian and Tom. Being a retired teacher, sure, I want kids back in school, but I don't think we should move forward until we know that the health department and such is saying that it's safe for our children.
Dan?
Yeah, I think, Doug, you make some very strong points, and I think we all share the view that we want the students back. I guess I think it's important to add, I do think the district is doing what it can. I know that the district sent a letter to the governor's office last week advocating for a change in social distancing guidelines to enable us to bring back more students. I know that the district has pushed hard to vaccinate as many school personnel as possible that wanted to be vaccinated to try to, increase the immunity and hopefully reopen schools. So I just think that there are things the school is doing that should be noted and that are positive. I agree that I think, our understanding is that we are, the Department of Health guidance is that we are subject to the 6-foot distancing rule, as are all other institutions that we find ourselves in. And until we get guidance that changes that, I don't think we're in a position to do it ourselves. And then I'm just curious, I think in terms of the class size data, the way I think of it, isn't it a question not so much of us versus other schools, but it's a function of your class size, the ability, the number of students you can have in a given classroom, and of these 21 other districts that you talk about, are they, aren't most of them in a hybrid scenario similar to ours? So, whether we may be about the same from an average number of students, but depending on what the size of our classrooms and depending on how many students they can fit. And I know that from the work we've done in the high school that we had some classrooms that were under the size that would commonly be recommended today for classroom size. So I think we want the same goal, but until we see that change from the Department of Health, which I know we're advocating for, I think we have to continue. I do think the idea of 3 days a week, if that's a feasible, if that's feasible to go 3 days a week and use that Wednesday as a day flex, cohort A 1 week, cohort B the other week, then certainly that would be something good to do. But and I would urge the district to consider that. But otherwise, that's how I feel at this point.
Thanks, Dan. Just a couple comments that I have, starting with the class sizes. Yes, we might have classes that only have 15 kids in, or we have some classes that go up to 23, 24. I don't know the exact numbers. But it is going to be dependent not just on the numbers of students that are currently enrolled in those classrooms, but also on the footprint of the class itself. and what we're able to do with the guidelines that are coming down from the Department of Health. And it's very difficult to compare one district with another. It's apples to oranges. And yes, I know Dr. Douglas and others, we have said many times that, other districts aren't able to do this either, or they are, but everybody has their different circumstances. And maybe some of these districts are removing music classes, art classes, and using all those specials, the librarians, and using all of that staff to teach math, English, science, and social studies. So they're able to move kids around and spread them out, but the children aren't getting the broad education that they typically would be in a 5-day-a-week scenario. And for some families and for some children, that would also be a huge negative impact on them, for those students that, get up every morning because they can't wait for their music class to all of a sudden for us to say, oh, well, there's no music and every music teacher is now going to teach math. So, we don't know what those districts are doing, and maybe some of those districts are doing that. And we've made the decision not to do that at this point. So, that's kind of my comment related to that. Around the legal guidance, we have talked to our lawyers. Dr. Douglas and Caitlin just recently had a discussion in the past couple of days with our district lawyer, who has again stated that we must adhere to Department of Health guidance, and that is the 6 feet socially distance. And I know it was brought up at other board meetings about, unless not able to, and some of the examples were, when kids are going from classroom to classroom, or you're in the hallways, you're in elevators, whatever. And then it was also brought up about the core instruction, and the interpretation of that many people have had, including our lawyers, have been that core instruction is the one-on-one instruction that, a teacher might need to give to their students to, review a math problem with them, or they're checking their spelling on something that they've written, and where the teacher has gone over to the desk to have that one-on-one conversation with a student where they've crossed that 6-foot barrier. So that's the interpretation that we have had. That's the interpretation that our lawyer has had. We have, based on previous discussion that we've had as a group, most of us were on board with not requiring the written response from our lawyer, because that's an added expense to our district, and we know that those monies can be used in elsewhere within the district. And so, I feel like we have put that one to bed. And then lastly, regarding the committee that met over the summer, yes, we had a cross-functional committee that met and put together the process for our district when we reopened in September. We reviewed that as a board in July. At the time, there was no push from anybody on the board that said, let's take a vote. We all reviewed that plan. We gave a thumbs up that we were in support of that plan. And we went forward, and nothing has changed since then. The guidance coming out of the Department of Health has not changed. So for us to revisit that plan, we're still in the same position that we were back in July when that plan was first presented to us. Yes, things have changed as far as what we've learned about COVID, and things have changed around, the number of cases, and the fact that we are vaccinating now, which is absolutely wonderful that so many of our staff are getting vaccinated. But that hasn't changed the guidance that is coming from the Department of Health. And until that changes, I don't feel comfortable changing. And then lastly, just for anybody who might be listening, there's been a lot of pushback, a lot of comments out there about that the board and the district doesn't care about the kids, and that, we don't want the kids in school. And I just want to assure you, that there's nothing that any of us want more but to have the students in school. You know, we have taken the position that we will not go against the Department of Health guidance. And I know that means that we're not very popular right now because there are so many families and so many parents that, you know, are focused on getting their child back in school. And I understand that. I know it's difficult, but believe me when I say that, you know, we are doing everything that we can to be ready for when that guidance changes, and when that guidance changes, we will change as well. I know, you know, Dr. Douglas and Mr. Gill have been talking to the administrators and have been talking to the HTA regarding the potential of doing a more flexible 3-day, 2-day alternating week schedule with those Wednesdays. And as soon as that plan is ready, I'm assuming that will be discussed and that will be communicated, and changes will be made accordingly. But I think that's all I have. So, Warren?
Okay, so one thing on the class size, comparing it is not a fair thing. I mean, I know because of my 35 years of teaching that the language in Horseheads is specific to class size, and I know other districts do not have that. So we may be under only because the language in those other contracts allow them to do what they do and they don't do in Horseheads. So we're not making a fair comparison there. And then I honestly don't know if I should say this, but I am really frustrated on this. Why did I have to come to executive session tonight? Everything we just talked about, we talked about in executive session. So I really don't understand why I had to be in executive session or why we had to have this discussion in public. I'm not sure where the line is here, but I'm frustrated with that.
Sorry, Doug.
Oops.
So a few things here. Classroom sizes are very comparable because state education department has very specific rules about the sizes of classrooms. And so they're virtually universal in school districts. So they are actually, it's not apples to oranges, it's very much apples to apples. In terms of class size provision and our teacher's contract, that's actually not fair to the other districts that don't have that. That classroom size provision should decrease the size of our classrooms, not make them larger. Other teachers teaching core subjects instead of specials, that's not ideal. But again, I'm going to advocate for students with mental health issues, which I think far outweigh the number of students that are getting those core subject material subjects and would be adversely affected by their discontinuation. Again, in my opinion, we need to be doing everything we can to get students back in session more days a week. And if that means we're reassigning teachers or teaching assistants to teach core subjects or whatever, using more spaces in the buildings, that's what we need to be doing, in my opinion. What are other districts doing? Are they on hybrid models? Well, yeah, everything other than a 5-day a week in person is hybrid. But other districts in our area are doing 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or 5 days a week, or are soon going to be. And then, of course, the questions will increase as to why Horseheads is unable to do so. And to Warren's comment about executive session, I discussed a conversation Dr. Douglas and I had about written legal opinion that was not privileged, not in executive session, and I just urged the district to obtain that. That's all I said.
Everything we just said in public session was said in executive session. We had this discussion in executive session. That's why I'm frustrated. I don't mind having the discussion. Just don't bring me in a half hour early. If we're gonna have it at the end of the regular board meeting, I'm fine with that.
Dr. Douglas, were you going to say something?
I was just waiting for anybody else. So in regards, like Doug said, in regards to executive session and Warren, the information that I brought to executive session was direct information from our school attorney. Have I referred to that to other board members to let them know where we would be? Yes, but the information that was shared was for executive session.
But we went and shared it in public. I don't understand where the line is, I guess. I know what you told me in executive session. What I was told in executive session was rehashed out in public session. That's all I'm saying.
And I'll take responsibility for that because I said some of that in response to what Doug brought up. So I apologize for that. I was trying to answer the question. Any other comments?
Well, one of the questions Doug has put in front of the board is, do you wish this plan to go forward? Or do you wish for the superintendent to develop a different plan? I need direction at this point because it is becoming a constant question at the past couple of board meetings. I do what the board asks me to do. So I would like clarity and guidance. Do we stick with our plan until guidance change? Or do we absolutely take a different attempt and redevelop this plan?
Brian?
I say stick with the current plan until the guidance changes. And I think Dan mentioned if there's a possibility to look at a third day, a 3-2 schedule, then I would be all in favor of that, but stick with the current plan because of the guidance from the Department of Health.
So do we want to do an official vote?
Well,
Dan?
I just think we'd have to be clear as to what we were voting for. So for example, I mean, you know, the plan's been in effect since September, right? So I mean, the plan is the plan. We are living the plan. I think would, as Brian just said, if it's feasible to add a third day of in-person instruction for cohort A and cohort B every other week, would I be in favor of that? Of course I would. And so, you know, I don't know if we need a vote just to say to the superintendent, can we please look at this? But, you know, I just think we need to be very clear on what we'd be voting for. I mean, the plan is, as you said, was already approved and put in place. I think it's important to remember that unfortunately, many students in the district were not able to do the hybrid learning in person they were supposed to do because of then the orange zone designation, which was outside of our control and that we were subject to. And as soon as you know, that was lifted and we were able to get kids back in, we did and acted quickly to do so. So I think the plan is the plan because we are subject to the Department of Health guidance, which it's based upon. But if it's feasible to consider a third day of remote instruction, I'd be in favor of asking the district to look at that. And if we have to vote on that, that's fine. But otherwise, you know, I don't think it would be, frankly, I think it would be silly to vote on the plan now when it's been in place since September. And that's just, you know, that doesn't seem necessary to me.
I agree. And as and I believe, and Dr. Douglas and Tony, you can correct me, but there's already work in progress to determine the feasibility of going to a 2-day alternating schedule.
We are trying to have those discussions. There are many complications to it because of special schedules on Wednesday, food service delivery, as well as trying to coordinate like an A week, a B week, in addition, so that a student isn't coming in every week and always having the same special on Wednesday. As well as we also have to consider there are implications to our community for those that use secondary level students to care for primary students on Wednesday if it's only at the secondary level, not at the elementary level. So there's all these things. There are many moving parts, but we are exploring it. Right, Tony?
That is correct. And there's also, there's a balancing to this. We also have to address 920 something students that are on remote. 25% of our students are remote, and often Wednesdays are used for those individual contact for kids that don't get in person, or that opportunity for in person that we're trying to keep, and was so important to fall through the cracks. They're social emotional because they don't get that direct contact with a teacher. So our staff are trying to reach out and make those connections on Wednesdays with those 100% remote students. So there's a balance there. It'll benefit the kids that are currently already coming, and it will increase the ability for them to come. We can't lose sight of 25% of our population that never walks in our buildings. So that's my concern about Wednesdays.
Brian.
Christine, I'd like to just mention too, not only thinking about this, but hopefully being optimistic where at some point within the next, 1 to 4 weeks, the guidelines are relaxed to 3 feet. And then, the directive is, get the desk back in the building as quickly as possible. And hopefully when we get that, green light, so to speak, from the governor, from the Department of Health, we have a plan in place to start moving desks in. And I'm hoping that all happens here in the next month. So, hopefully we can move towards that. So this discussion is, not necessary.
Yeah. And just so that I can add, Brian, Mike Coughlin is already working on staging those desks. At this point, if it comes down to we go to 3 feet and barriers, he's already researched, even if it costs us $600,000, $700,000, if we're required to, even if it's for 8 weeks, the district will be ready to do that. I do not need donations or anything, but I will tell you, we've already reached out. It's 4 to 6 weeks for any type of barrier to be processed, shipped, and put into place. That's why I'm hoping barriers might be redefined like face shields or goggles. That's a $25,000 cost, but the district's positioned to be able to do either or.
Okay, so Dan.
Can I make one more comment? And it's not exactly following the discussion, but it just made me, I share Doug's concern about students that are suffering, and having mental health issues. And I know, we added the social workers at all the elementary schools last year in the budget to help provide those services. I know the district, as with 5 children in, at all levels in the district, I see communications, I get the newsletters. I know the district is doing a lot to push out information and resources. I hope parents are seeing that. But I just think maybe one of the things we can do, if we can't get the kids in 5 days a week yet, is to just redouble our efforts to try to make sure people know that those resources exist, that the elementary schools have social workers, that there are resources in the other levels. And I'm not saying we're not doing that, but we just continue to hit that as hard as we can, so that if there are students out there that need help, they can connect with those resources. It's just maybe something we can do, and if that helps one or 2 students, then it's worth the effort. So just to put that out there as a consideration in the meantime.
Thanks, Dan.
So Christine, if I can assume my direction from the board, at least without a vote, we continue along the plan that we have. We look for potential adjustments if we can make them happen. And we hope for the 3-foot distancing coming that Assemblyman Friend started, and be prepared to shift as soon as possible and within reason and safety. Is that pretty much what the board wishes?
Yes.
If I could see a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Warren and Dan. I might have missed your thumbs. Okay,
My thumb was up. I thought you recorded it already.
sorry, I wasn't looking. I didn't scan. Okay,
Then we will go forward with the position of the board. Thank you.
anything else before we adjourn? Okay, that's all we have tonight. So can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And any abstentions? Okay, I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Thank you.
This concludes the budget meeting for March 4th of the Horsehead Central School District, as well as board discussion. We thank everybody for paying attention and being online during this COVID pandemic time. As always, if you have any questions, please contact the district, either Nancy's office, Nancy Perillo online, or myself, and we try to pride ourselves in getting back to you as swiftly as possible. Thank you all for coming out, and our next meeting is March 18th as another budget meeting. Have a good evening.